We were in the desert, but we thought it was a beach because it was a lot of sand. And before you know it, there's a bunch of people in the night in the desert. We see lights everywhere. And before we know it, we end up in a jail cell. I can't get a job. I can't get student loans to go to school. I can't even join the military. And I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to make money? We help people with money. We're in the money business. There's no industry that makes more millionaires than the industry that we're in. That's sexy. If money or people can solve it, it's not a problem. It's a situation. You are the reason why you're in that situation. You want the solution? Go to the mirror. You want the problem? Stay in the mirror.
I think about myself. I would statistically, by now, most likely be dead. Either getting shot or...
Hey guys, welcome to the Ownership Empire podcast. And man, I'm so excited to be here. And by the way, this is episode 1. I'm going into the future. And some of you guys, I'm telling you to come check episode 1 because you're going to learn what this podcast is about. You're going to learn about my background. You're going to learn about my co-host's background as well. And we're going to talk about money and what this podcast is all about. So with that being said, my name is JC Rangel, and I've got my friend, my business partner and co-host, Mr. Ed Ayala. Ed, how you doing, brother?
Amazing, JC. How you doing out in California? How's everything?
From California to the Dominican Republic, man.
Correct.
Is that right?
Thanks to technology, brother.
Mm-hmm.
We are connected.
That's right. It's interesting because, Ed, you and I were talking about I mentioned to you, I'm going to start a podcast, right? In this insurance business, there's not enough people out there in the financial services, direct sales industries, not enough people talking about what's going on. There's a few people, don't get me wrong. And then you said to me, what did you say to me, man? You said, hey, JC, how about we tag team a podcast together? Remember that?
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. I know there's so many people out there. They don't know what we have right now in our hands, the opportunity. And, the great thing is, right, that it's something that can help everyone because it's what's it called again? Ownership Empire. Right, ownership empire. And I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about. But yeah, man, that's how we got started. And I'm excited we're going to get it rocking.
That's right. It goes to show that thoughts really are things, right? It was just a thought. And like, we didn't even have a name. Hey, let's figure out a name. And we went through a couple of names. We came up with Ownership Empire. So before we get into your story, Matt, my story, what the podcast is about, yep. You are the one that really came up with that name, Ownership Empire Podcast. Tell me the thought process behind the name and why that's the case.
When you think about it, right? And I'm going to get into this a little bit more, right? But, we're taught to go to school, get a degree, get a job, and go work for someone else. And you're really building somebody else's dreams, right? Somebody else's ownership. And when I say ownership, it's not just business ownership. It's ownership of your life. It's ownership of your time. It's ownership where you have control over your destiny, right? And so that's why I figured, ownership encompasses everything. So sometimes people think, right, Jay, it's just money. It's not just money. It's having ownership of your life, okay? A lot of people don't have control of their life. Money is a big factor, of course, right? But yeah, and then empire is just cool, right? Because, we're here to build an empire.
I love it. It's so true. You know what? It's interesting that you bring that up because even me, as you're saying that, I'm like, it's true. When I think of ownership, my first thoughts are ownership of what? Of my business, ownership of my assets, but it goes way beyond that, right? And entrepreneurship can get people to truly take ownership of their life, to truly take ownership of their, not only their life, but stress or lack of stress, right? Because I'm sure you've been there, and we're going to talk a lot about this in the podcast. We're going to have people who are going to interview on this podcast. Stress is the number one killer, right? And money is one of the number one reasons why people are stressed. Money, as a matter of fact, is one of the number one reasons why divorces happen and so many things, but stress is the number one killer. But most people are in stressful situations, which I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but I'll bring it back. But most people get in financial situations and stress because of it, because they need to take care of business, because they need to get the right education, because they need to listen to the right podcast. They need to surround themselves with the right people, right? But before we get into that, we're going to talk plenty about money. Ed, why don't we let our folks, our friends, our followers know a little bit about your background, a little bit about my background, I think your background is a lot more interesting than mine. So why don't we start with you, bro?
No, no, stop it, stop it. We both have amazing backgrounds. Yeah, I mean, very, very humble beginnings. I know, just like you, we'll talk about your story here in a minute. Basically, grew up in Harlem housing projects, actually Jefferson housing projects for anyone who's from New York City. And yeah, we, paycheck to paycheck. My mother and father came, from Puerto Rico. And my mom was a sewing, they call it sewing operator. Basically, it was like a sweatshop. She was, making clothes on a machine, a sewing machine. My dad was like mopping floors, custodial work. And so really humble beginnings. I remember my mom saying, JC, when you're going down the stairs, but in Spanish, ten cuidado con la persona que se están inyectando la droga. In English, we had heroin addicts down the stairwell of the projects, and they were like be shooting up. And she would say, let them finish, because if you don't let them finish, right, they may get angry. So think about that, right? A little backpack, going to school, down the stairs. That's the type of life that, that
Wow.
I had. And yeah, basically did what most people do, right? Go to school, finish high school. I didn't go to college, right? I was very money motivated at an early age, which, by the way, I left home right around 17 years of age, just getting out of high school. And although my mom was amazing, my father was cool. He was a semi-gangster. We'll talk about my dad in another episode. He's a little bit on the wild side. My mom was a real rock, of the family. And it wasn't that I didn't love my family. It was that, I wanted freedom, brother. From early on, I wanted freedom. I don't know how many, you ask most people, what is freedom, right? Again, it's not just financial freedom. It's like, I like to do what I want to do. I don't want to have any limitations. I don't want people telling me what to do, right? And so I left, early, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So I just started working all kinds of odd jobs. Today we call it hustle, right? I was hustling, right? So I was doing construction part time. I was doing DJing in a nightclub part time, and I was stripping also in that same nightclub. So
Nice.
yeah, yeah, male stripper, yeah, crazy, right? 18, 19,
See what I
20.
mean? That your background is way more interesting than mine, bro. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, yeah, but it was just because, right, have the grind, the hustle, right? I was figuring out a way to make money legally, right? Because I didn't want to disappoint my mom, as I don't want to get involved in the drug business. Okay, my older brother got involved in that. That's for another day, also. So I went down the right path, worked my butt off, and anyway, when I hit 2021, got into the New York City Police Department. What I did was I hedged my bet, right? I took like every exam: bus driver, fire department, sanitation. I took them all. NYPD called me first. That's why I became a cop. There was no rhyme, no reason. Um,
Interesting.
Advanced very quickly. I've always been extremely motivated. Became a detective. Most of the years, about 7 out of the 10 years, I was 10 years with NYPD. I worked as a undercover narcotics detective, and basically it was in the 90s, late 80s, 90s. Okay, so I'm kind of giving away my age there, where it was a high crack epidemic, and anybody that lives in New York, it was crazy then. And we were doing, brother, 3 to 5 search warrants per week, an abundance, okay, of crack houses to execute search warrants on. And you know what? When I think back, Jay, it wasn't really so much locking up the people selling drugs, because hey, if you want to use it, you use it. Who cares, right? It was the violence, man. It was like the amount of violence that was happening and during that time, a lot of homicides and stuff. People can't play. The kids can't play out in the streets. So that was kind of my mission in the time. It wasn't about the paycheck, because I was bringing home maybe about $500 a week after they take out all the deductions and stuff. And yeah, I did that. Then in 1995, someone talked to me about financial services, and I don't know, it just made sense. I was like, I don't have no money. Okay, I was in debt, about $16,000 in credit card debt, back in the mid '90s, and I'm like, they're going to show me how to make money and learn the money business. I said, this is a no freaking brainer. So, yeah, I jumped right into the company, a company called Primerica Financial Services, a great company. Okay, they are still around today. I think they're going on almost 50 years in business, and I didn't know anything, man. When people say, "Oh, well, Ed, I don't have sales skills, or I didn't have financial skills, I didn't have this or that," listen, Jay, I got into the business, no sales skills. I was the opposite, okay? Because when you're executing a search warrant, right, you don't ask somebody, okay, would you like me to put your handcuffs on the front or the back? Like, there's no like closing questions. They don't teach you that shit, right? There's no influence. Your influence is get on the ground, right? Because you got to take action, right? Because you could get shot, you get killed. And so it's funny because I had to learn everything from scratch, right? Positive, right? Supposed to be positive in in business, they teach you, right? dude, I was the most negative person, right? You know me now, right? I'm super positive all the time. This is,
Yeah.
but before, brother, before personal development, before being in business, I was the most negative person because why? I always tell people every time someone has to pick up the damn phone to dial 911, you know what that means? This shit hit the fan, right? Like, think
Yeah.
about it. When you hit 911, it's called an emergency. So every time, every encounter is an emergency. It's always negative. It's not like there's a birthday party and right, they're inviting you to the birthday party. No, it's an emergency. So yeah, brother, I was super negative, no selling skills, horrific people skills, right? And so yeah, the first year pretty sucked. I worked part time, didn't really make much money, and then my second year I went full time, personal development, all the sales training and stuff, which I really recommend. And was with Primerica 15 years. We'll talk more about detail later, right, as we get into the industry and the business on other podcasts. But yeah, did extremely well. Okay, made multi-millions of dollars there in commissions, and then exited with a multi-million-dollar exit. Right in 2010, I sold. Right after that, I was, still about 6 months. I took off, didn't do much, but I was still hungry. I wanted to do something else. I started a skincare company, my own network marketing company. I was a co-founder, co-owner, CEO of that company, and we launched we did a pretty innovative launch, and we had a skincare product that was pretty amazing. It had a wow effect. Anyway, we put 64,000 recruits into the company in the first 60 days. Okay. As soon as we launched the first week, we did 2.1 million in sales, which I'm told that's a record, but I don't know if it's number one, but it's got to be in the top three launches of a network marketing company. And I sold my interest because I had some inconsistent goals and vision with the owners. They wanted to go a different direction. So I ended up selling. And yeah, after that, I've just built a lot of businesses, worked with a lot of different companies. And what's crazy is, right, we met in solar. I've done solar, right? I own a roofing business also. So I own several businesses. But you know what brought me back? Financial services, the money business, right? Because out of everything I've done, the one business that I say is something that you can bless somebody else with, right? And have them change their life financially, which I know we're going to talk about right there on the podcast, right? How important it is to have, you know, uh, excess money in your life, right? How about that? When your bank account is overflowing, your stress level goes down. So, yeah, Jay, that's pretty much my story. Now getting back into financial services, excited to partner with you. And yeah, listen, dude, I know you got a very, very powerful story. And for everybody here on the podcast that's joining us, I want to hear Jay's story.
Well, I don't. I probably should have gone first because the top of your story is going to be tough. But it is what it is. I didn't think that through, but it's all right though. My story is okay. So yeah, no. Before I even get into my story, man, that's crazy. See, I've heard your story before, and I know a lot of the story. But the story really hit me about when you were a kid and you're walking down the stairs and there's drug fiends shooting up heroin. That's crazy,
Yeah,
man. You know what I mean? And so
yeah,
yeah, to give you, and again, we want our listeners to, by the way, skip this part. You don't want to hear our stories, right? Get to the meat and potatoes of it. But we want to make sure that we also let people know, hey, here's what we are about. We are two entrepreneurs. Here's our background. If you want to learn more about our background, you could always come back to this episode, which is episode 1. We're going to have many episodes. We're going to be shooting every single week. And this will always be the episode that you can come and learn more about the people that are talking about this podcast and why you should listen. Because one of the things that Ed didn't touch on is the fact that you became, and we're going to touch on it a little bit more, after, but how successful you became in the financial services industry, made millions of dollars, sold your book of business for millions of dollars, ended up retiring, right? And
yep,
but a true warrior like you, it's really hard to just retire and sit around and just play golf all day. And what are you gonna do all day, right? When you've got that kind of drive, like I'm 43 years old right now. I don't see myself retiring in 20 years, man. Not because of financial reasons, not because I
yep,
can't, but because this is fun. Making money
yep,
is fun. Helping people make money is even more fun than making money for yourself, right? Helping other
correct,
people win, changing people's lives. That is fun, right? And I
correct.
was told a long time ago that we are the happiest when we are creating. When we are creating and we're building something. And, one of the audios that I listen to a lot is The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale, right? And he talks
Amazing.
about that as well, right? The progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Even when I'm building, my wife and I, we just had a baby, right? We have a 3-month-old baby girl. When I'm building her bassinet, when I'm building a little closet that we bought specifically for her, right? And as I'm seeing it come together, I get this sense of satisfaction. Well, the same thing happens when you're building people, when you're building a business, when you're building a residual income, all of that. So, but anyways, with that being said, a little bit about my story, guys. I was born in Mexico, brought to this country at the age of 6. My mother left Mexico when I was about 4. At that time, I only had one brother. I now have 2. And my brother Louis and we stayed with our grandma to the point that 2 years, right? She had nobody here except for one friend, not even a family member, one friend in the US. But she left an abusive relationship in Mexico. My dad was a drunk. He was a woman beater. He was just a bad guy, right? Let's just leave it at that. So she escaped that relationship. She took my brother and I to my grandma's house, and my grandma and my uncle lived with her. And my grandma basically told my mom, listen, don't worry about your kids. We're going to take care of them. You know, the father, he's not going to be able to touch them. Your kids are safe. My uncle told her the same thing. So my mom left to pursue a better life for us. And she came here for 2 years, to the point that my brother was calling my grandmother mom. And my grandmother used to tell my brother, I'm not your mom. She would show my brother a picture. This is your mom. I'm your grandma, right? Long story short, my mom saved up enough money, came here, worked in the garment district in downtown Los Angeles. She built up enough money to get us over here. So when we got here, I remember, man, it was on Nebraska Street or Nebraska Avenue in the state of Southgate, California in the 90s, which, by the way, if you look up the 90s, Southgate, California was the city with the highest drug trafficking in America in the 90s, Southgate, California. And so I remember parking. By the way, the first time we tried to get from Mexico to the US, let's just put it this way, we were unsuccessful, right? We had to try again. I remember, it's funny, my grandma was with us when we were coming over, okay? And I remember we were in the desert, but we thought it was a beach because there was a lot of sand, right? And before you know it, there's a bunch of people in the night in the desert crossing over to the US, right? And we see lights everywhere. And before we know it, we end up in a jail cell. But we were with my grandma. I don't know if it was a jail cell or a different type of holding because we're children, but my grandma was with us. We were unsuccessful. We tried again. We were successful the second try. I remember pulling up in a car and getting off of the car and seeing my mom at a distance. She lived in an apartment complex. And my brother and I running to my mom. I remember seeing a parking stall, right? The brick, right, so to speak, the concrete parking stall, and thinking to myself, mind you, this is 1989, thinking to myself, don't trip over that parking stall while you jump over it to go and hug your mom. I remember that detail. And I hugged my mom, and that was the happiest day next to the days that my children were born, right? And it's a beautiful thing, right? So I only saw my mom going to work, getting up at 5 in the morning, leaving in the bus with a big old bag of garments to downtown Los Angeles to sew. She was a seamstress. She used to work Herbalife. She used to work Amway. At one point she had a bunch of air filters in the house, in the apartment. At one point she sold all kinds of stuff. At 10 years old, I used to go to meetings with my mom, and back then they used to use chalkboards. They used to draw circles with chalkboards, and I was drawing cartoon characters in the back. I used to go to network marketing meetings with my mom when I was 10 years old. So at 18 years old, I got introduced to the industry, and I was like, dude, I like this, man. This is what my mom has done. And I remember, but when I was a kid, I remember asking my mom once, I said, Mom, why do you do this extra work? You already have a job. And my mom said to me, she says, son, if I want to give you and your brothers the life that I want to give you, it's not going to happen by working for somebody else. That's what my mom instilled in me. So I was always, that stuck with me, you know? Yeah. So at 18 years old, I get started network marketing. I made it go. Here's the thing about it, at 18 years old, I still didn't have my social security number. Remember, I was born in Mexico. So what happens is that I try to go to school. They said, because we were always told, get good grades, go to school, right? So you get a high paying job. I try to go to school. All my friends are getting student loans to pay for college or community college. I go, they said, you can't get anything for free. You got to pay for everything. You can't get any student loans. I said, all my friends are doing it. They said, you don't qualify because of your immigration status. I try to get a job. They say, you can't get a job, right? Because of your immigration status. I talked to one of my mom's friends, an older gentleman, and he says, I'm going to give you some advice, but do not tell your mom I gave you this advice. I said, okay, what's up? He says, you need to join the military. Now, mind you, I graduated in 2001. I'm having this conversation with this gentleman late September 2001,
Yep.
2 weeks after 9/11. He's
Yep.
telling me, you got to go to the military. They're going to help you out. They're going to take you in. You're going to go to war, but you're going to get your papers. You're going to get a good career. You're going to be able to help your mom. He knew that was because see, I grew up in an environment, bro, where there was drugs being sold. At 10 years old, I had a double barrel shotgun pulled on me because I was collecting cans from my neighbor's yard. And some gangsters pulled a double barrel shotgun on me. This is the veterano, cholo looking guys with the Ben Davis, creased up, the Chicano culture in LA. And I had knives pulled on me as a kid, shotguns, guns. I've seen people get shot. I've seen people get stabbed. That's the environment I grew up in.
Yep.
And so I knew there's ways to make money. But I also knew that I'm the oldest of three brothers. So I want to leave, and I don't want to disappoint my mom. That's the biggest thing. I want to make her proud. And I saw a lot of suffering. I saw a lot of people growing up and getting into trouble, getting shot, getting killed, going to jail, right? And I said, that's not the route I want to go. So he says, go to the military. The next day, I'm at the Marine Corps station. I go to the recruiter on I remember it was on Belgrave and Pacific in the city of Huntington Park, California, right next to Southgate. I go to the recruiter. I say, hey, man, my name is JC Rangel. I had just won a world title in karate, by the way. I did karate from 10 till 18. At 18, I just turned 18. At 17, I won a world title. So at 18 years old, I'm at the recruiter's office. I said, listen, I want to join the Marines. If you could send me to boot camp today, I'll go today. I'm ready to go. And he didn't know my motivation, but I knew. And I said, look, I heard you're supposed to be in good shape. I'm in really good shape. I just won a world title in karate. And I do karate, kickboxing, and I'm ready to go. He says, come on down. And then he says, so he starts asking me questions, and he finds out about my immigration situation. He says, a couple of years ago, we used to be able to help people in your situation. We can't do that anymore. So imagine I can't get a job. I can't go get student loans to go to school. I can't even join the military. And I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to make money? It reminds me of the Biggie Small song. Remember, you're either slanging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. That's what Biggie Small says in that song. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? My option, I'm trying to do things right. A friend of mine introduced me to network marketing. He says, hey, man, there's a way. Let me introduce you to network marketing. And I said, here's my immigration status. He says to me, which, by the way, that guy that I just recruited him into my business and I sold him a policy. He's a client of mine, by the way. My first sponsor in network marketing in
Wow.
2001.
Damn.
Yeah.
From that far back.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. We've been
Wow.
friends. He and I have been friends since like second grade. I beat up my first bully in front of him in his yard. That's a story. We'll talk about that story at another podcast.
Yeah.
But what happened
great.
is that they introduced me to network marketing. They said, you could join network marketing. I started to learn leadership. I started to learn business. I started to learn team building, leverage income, residual income. I started learning principles I never heard in school. Long story short, in that industry, I didn't make any money for a couple of years, but I learned a lot. But by age 29, I had a goal. I wrote down at 18, I'm so happy and grateful now that I've retired my mom on or before the age of 30. By age 29, I retired my mom thanks to that industry. By age 30, I made my first million in that industry, and the rest is history. We've made millions of dollars, built teams in the over 100,000 people. So anyways, here we are now shooting a podcast, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these subjects. So that's my story, man.
Amazing, man. Very, very, very crazy. Yeah, I didn't know a lot of those details, by the way, because, like I said, that was, what I loved about my job. It wasn't like really locking people up. You know what I mean? Sometimes I felt bad for these people. They're on drugs. It sucks, right? They can't get off, right? It's very addictive. But it was the violence, right? Like you saw so much violence, people getting shot, people getting killed, But then again, right? When you have money, you have options, right? You don't have to live through that. And I hope that in this podcast, right, people realize that it's about options, right? If we're not the option, find an option, right? But there's got to be a way for you not to be stressed out, as you said, right? Because it's such a major cause of people, getting sick, dying early. It's because of stress, It's a big deal.
Yes.
One of my favorite sayings you just remind me is, we're all born, right? You were born to be successful, right? I always tell people, look, it's not that I'm the most religious person in the world, but I believe, yeah, God is there, but he gives you choice, right? He gives you free will, right? You have to make a decision. But one thing he doesn't do is create junk, right? We're all born to be successful. The problem is we're programmed for failure, right, Jay?
That's right.
Because what happens? if your parents just had a job and they were getting by paycheck to paycheck, that's your environment, your siblings, your immediate family, right? And it's like doctors, scientists, or there's been a lot of studies, but like the first 7 years is the years where you're pretty much programmed. So what you
Yes.
see, right? What you see, your environment, what you hear is what you do. And what are you programmed? As I said earlier, right? When I was telling my story, you're programmed to go to school, get good grades, right? And hopefully get a degree, work for somebody else, right? Try to go up the corporate ladder to get a pension, which a pension is half of what you can't live on to begin with, right? That's number one, right? And you're building somebody else's dreams. That's why most people fail financially. You're just programmed for failure. So I believe people are good people,
True.
right? A lot of people be listening to this. You're a good person. You're not a loser. It's just that, guess what? If you would have been brought up in the Jeff Bezos family, right? If you're brought up in the Elon Musk family, guess what they're talking about? Unlimited opportunity, unlimited money. You got to own your own business. You got to be the CEO, right? You control your future. That's not the stuff that I heard, and I know you didn't hear that either.
Right.
You know,
No, no, it's
yeah,
so true. Proximity is key. Who you
right.
surround yourself with, right? Who you listen to, who you're viewing uh all the time, the stuff that you're feeding yourself. And the thing is that the days of today are not like before. Nowadays, you got a bunch of junk. You got people scrolling on social media all day long, looking at useless stuff, entertaining themselves. One thing I learned a long time ago is that rich people educate themselves, poor people entertain themselves. 6 in the morning this morning, I'm at the gym, right? I'm listening to something from our Diamond University on while I'm working out. I'm listening about products, right? We're in the financial service business, right? I'm learning about annuities. I'm learning about IULs. Even though I sell a lot, my team sells a lot. But guess what? I'm all because I understand the philosophies of winners. The philosophies of winners is, and don't get me wrong, do I enjoy some good music while at the gym? Yes. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think anything in excess is bad, right? Too much water can kill you, right? But most people don't work on themselves. And then here's what happens. I love it's a quote from John Addison. He says, most people live in the world of the someday. Someday I'm not going to be broke. Someday I'm going to get out of debt. Someday I'm going to take my family on vacation. Someday I'm going to put my kids in private school. Someday, until they run out of days. And then one day they wake
Yeah.
up and they wonder what happened to all those days. One day they're in their deathbed, wonder what happened to all those days. Well, guess what? Most people are going to slack off through life. They're going to tippy toe around life, being too doggone afraid to make a mistake, being too afraid about what other people think about them, about they might fail. Before they know it, they're 65 years old. They're like, dude, what happened to all this, all those years?
Yeah,
But he says, but a handful of people's, see, he says, a handful of people, their some days become how they live their everydays. A handful of people, their some days become how they live their everydays. And you know what? That is the truth. I love seeing my children grow up. I love working out of home. I'm in my home right now. I love being able to take them, on vacations. Last year we went to Hawaii. We took my mother, we took my kids, we took my mother-in-law, right? We were out there for like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. Why? Because of the decisions, because I surround myself with people. It's not because I'm very special. It's because I'm smart enough to surround myself with people that are smarter, and more successful than I am.
yeah. Yeah, you just reminded me because it's basically right, and I've heard that speech so many times, right? John Addison is amazing. He's a badass. He would always talk about that, and it's the pain of change or the pain of regret, right? Like you're gonna have the regret when you look back on your life and you say, you know what? I should have done this. I should have tried that. I should have, tried this, and then you run out of time. So what I always tell folks is just make the change. You know where the change starts? Right? Right here, right? It's all in the mind. When I used to hear that, Jay, like, oh, it's all in your mind. I'm like, what do you mean it's in my mind? My mind is okay. I didn't realize, okay, that my mind was limiting me, right, from so many things. You said it before, right? What people think about me, right? That was a limiting belief, right? Can I really make money? That's the limiting belief. Money is the root of all evil. It's all these limiting beliefs, right? Where do we hear those? Growing up, right? Our environment, my neighborhood, right? I grew up in housing projects, right? Nobody there is talking about, okay, being the CEO of a company or building a multi-million dollar, business, right? Nobody's talking about that. See? So, yeah, it's our thoughts, it's our minds. Another thing I say is the only difference between you and everybody else is really two things. Think about it: the way you think, right? How you the meaning that you give to things, right? It doesn't matter what happens to you, right? When you have the right mindset, right? You give things the right meaning. Does it disempower me? Does it empower me? I decide
Mm.
that, right? Nobody else decides it. I give it that decision, right? And the second difference is what you want out of this life, man, for you and your family. I mean, that's pretty much it. When you boil it down to the right to the root, it's really the way you think. And for a lot of people here, I'm telling you, right? I used to fight that shit for like a couple years, man. Well, not two, about 2 years, right? Then I got into personal development. Then when I started reading, I'm going, oh my God, no wonder I think like this. No wonder I have certain fears, right? And the second you do that and you understand how your mind works, right? Because it's incredible. Guess what? You now know that you can control your destiny. And then you know what you want out of this life. Everybody has different goals, right? But one thing that we all want, we want to be able to live life on our own terms. And that
Yes.
was that for me was everything, being an entrepreneur. I know the same thing for you.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's, you talked about it earlier, right? Freedom. That's why we
Yeah.
do what we do. Many years ago, I had a friend that asked me, a mentor, he asked me, he says, JC, do you know what residual income is? I says, yes. He asked me, do you have any residual income? I said, no. He said, then you must not know what residual income is. See, if you knew what residual income was, you would run through a brick wall and get it. And I
Right.
said, wow. He says, you have residual bills. If you have residual bills, why wouldn't you have residual income? He says, you know that there's businesses that you can have residual income and passive income. That is income that comes in. You did the work one time, comes in over and over. That's why I love the industry that we're in, right? I own my book of business. Not only do I own my book of business, I own my agency. We're in the financial services industry, right? Life insurance, annuities. We help people with money. We're in the money business. $109
Yeah.
trillion industry. There's no industry that makes more millionaires than the industry that we're in. That's sexy. See, I had one time somebody tell me, JC, I don't think that industry is sexy. I said, dude, making money is sexy, bro. Protecting people is sexy. I'm in the money business, right? This is the most sexiest industry. I've never seen another industry, Ed, where you got 20 something year olds making seven figures and multiple seven figures as much as you do in this industry, right?
Correct.
So, anyways, yeah, but it's the
Yeah.
decisions that we make, right? What are we watching? Are you watching a video on YouTube to entertain yourself, or are you learning from some people talking about business? Are you learning from people that are in a better place than you are financially, or in your business, or in your relationships, and learning to get better on a daily basis? Because at the end of the day, time goes like this. Remember 2020, COVID?
Yeah.
Wasn't that long
Sure.
ago, man.
Correct.
More than half a decade is gone. Most people, guess what? They're in the same place or worse. They're probably most people are probably in more debt than they used to be in 2020. They're 6 years older than they used to be. They've got a little bit less energy, probably a little bit more responsibilities. Hey, it's never going to be a perfect time to go and change your life. The best time to plant a
Right.
tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So this podcast, what we want to do is we want to wake some people the heck up, because there are going to be some people that are going to, they're
Yeah.
not going to know what hit them 5, 10 years from now. And maybe it's not going to be working with us, but maybe it's going to be inspiring you to go and get off your butt and go and do something. Maybe it's not working with us. Maybe it's working with other people in a different industry, but you got to go out there and crush it because of some of the things you're going to learn in this podcast. Does that make sense, Ed?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And you just reminded me, right? When people talk about, oh, well, the industry is not that sexy or whatever, what? Because I've heard that before, right? I was in financial services for 15 years. Oh, I don't really want to do, investments and insurance and all that type of stuff. But yet they don't have enough money and they have tons of problems. And what I learned,
Right.
Jay, is that who was it? Anyway, it might have been John Edison. One of those talks he gave. It might have been the same, similar, but he said, write down 10 of your problems. Write them down. And I remember, started writing down the problems, right? You got a piece of crap car. You don't like the house or the neighborhood that you live in. You're in a ton of debt. You don't go on enough vacations, right? All these different things. How many of those can get resolved with money? Mine, it was all 10. But he said, most people, guess what? It's 9 out of 10. 90% of your problems are fixed when you have more money. That's the power of it, right? It's not, it's just that I tell people, those are the rules of the game, man. We live in a capitalistic, society. If you don't have money, guess what, right? You can't make decisions like living in the house that you want or taking the vacation that you want It's not possible. So
Yes.
yeah, that's the part that sucks.
And to your point, right? I learned a long time ago, and I've taught for 2 decades. If money or people can solve it, it's not a problem. It's a situation. Too many
Correct.
people call things problems that are not problems. They're situations. Can money or people solve it? Now, granted, if money or people, there's some things that really are problems, but the average person drowns in a cup of water. The average person calls something that's a problem that's a situation. It's like, bro, that's not really a problem, man. And by the way, the reason why you're in that situation is because you didn't do what you had to do to begin with. You
Right.
are the reason why you're in that situation. Go, you want the solution, go to the mirror. You want the problem, stay in the mirror. Stay there. That's a problem and that's a situation. And that's why we need more podcasts like this. But guess what? If we were talking about gossip on here, there'd be a lot more views. I mean,
Of
I
course.
know we're going to get a lot of views, a lot of
A
subscribers,
thousand
but
percent. Yeah, a thousand
if we
percent.
were talking about, yes, but because we're talking about this, but that's why we're not looking for everybody. We're looking for a select few people that want to do something special. And by the way, it's
Yeah.
2026. You've got AI, you've got all the information at your fingertips in 50
Right.
cents words. The only excuse for being broke is being in jail, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even some of those guys figure it out, right? They'll write a book or something and they'll still make money. Yeah,
Yeah.
the other day I had somebody say to me, yeah, I want to use AI, but I don't know how to use it. You know what I said? I said, how about ask AI, how do I use AI? He was like,
That's
shit, I
right.
never thought about that. It actually told him, this is how you use me. I'm like, there's zero excuse, right? When you
Yes.
started, I started, you know what I called those years? Freaking Fred Flintstone years, where
Yeah.
everything was on a chalkboard or a whiteboard, okay?
Yep.
There was no Zoom. You had to go meet people at a coffee shop. You had to go visit people in their home to do a presentation in their home on a whiteboard. That's like freaking Fred Flintstone, right?
Yes.
Compared to now.
It's
Now it's
true.
like freaking zero excuse. Zero, right?
Yes.
So I know some of you might go, man, JC's a little bit tough. Look in the mirror. You're the reason. Yeah, you are. It's the way you think. But here's the cool thing, you can change it. It's up to you. Get your ego out of the way. Stop telling yourself it's not for you. Stop telling yourself you're a loser. Don't let anybody else tell you you're a loser. And say to yourself, you know what? Maybe these guys are right. This guy came from Mexico, right? Crossed the border, right? You're cool with ICE, right? You're good now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
you're good. Just making sure. I heard a knock on the door, but anyway. So, right, he could do it. This guy here grew up in housing projects in Harlem. He did it. These guys, right, became multimillionaires, right, in the industries, right?
Yep.
Then I could do it. We're going to tell you how we did it. And guess what? You see me real clear, right? Right, Jay?
Yes.
I want everybody to understand this. We don't care whether you work with us or not. That's not the purpose of the podcast, right? A lot of times people go, they put a podcast because there's a reason. No, we just decided, you know what? We've been freaking blessed that somebody actually offered us the opportunity. Because think about it. If your mom was not in the business, right? And then you met a mentor at 18, right? They got you into the business.
Yep.
Where would your life be if you never got into this industry? Think
Yeah.
about that, right? I think about myself. I would statistically, by now, most likely be dead, either getting shot or just because of dying. Okay, cops, I don't know if you know this, they have one of the highest, not just suicide rates, death rates after they retire. Okay, you live,
Wow.
I think it's about 7 years maybe after you retire. So you do 20 years and you live about another seven. That's on average. Some live more or less, right? But that's crazy. It's because of the adrenaline dump that happens. 20 years, right? 911, 911, all of a sudden you stop and you die within 7 years. They don't pay out many police pensions. But anyway, yeah, it's crazy, brother.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't know those statistics. However, it makes a lot of sense. It totally adds up. It makes sense in my mind. You mentioned about, how about you ask Chat GPT?
yeah,
It reminds me, it's crazy how in this podcast we're gonna bounce off of each other so much, right? It reminds me when Tony Robbins, I was at a Tony Robbins event here in Los Angeles. I walked on fire and all that stuff. And
yeah.
he said,
Yep.
your biggest resource is your resourcefulness.
Correct.
Figure things out, man. Too many people stop too early. That's one of the things I teach my son. My son sometimes comes and says, hey, I can't figure this out. He's 12 years old. I just turned 12 this month. I can't figure this out. Dad, can you help me with this? And I'll ask him, how do you think you should do it?
Right.
Right? Or, hey, how
That's
do
the
you
answer.
do this? How do you think? Let's see. Think a little bit. let's say, pretend I wasn't here and you had to figure it out, what would you do? You got to
Correct.
start turning the gears. You got to start thinking. And so many times, I'll give you an example, man. This is one of the stories that it's one of my favorite stories about my journey. 2019, I was with a, so 2018, I was with a network marketing company. I'm company's still around. I'm with this network marketing company. I'm not active, but I'm active with my qualifications. So I'm getting a residual income check. They were going through some money problems. They sold to some guy. The guy came back and cut a bunch of people's check, including mine. People that were not active, but I was qualified per their comp plan. That's when I was like, that was one of those times where I was like, I think I'm done with this industry. I wasn't yet, but I thought I was. But I started a student loan forgiveness call center. We've all had some losses. And by the way, people shouldn't be, don't get confused. Nobody advertises their losses. On social media, nobody advertises their losses. They just advertise their wins. Nobody's winning consistently like that. So people sometimes they're just watching. Wow, this person's traveling. Wow, this person's so happy. Wow, this person bought a house. Wow, this person's winning. This person got a promotion. Nobody's advertising their losses. So don't fall into that trap. Okay. So that's one of the bad things about social media, by the way. So, anyways, I started student loan forgiveness call center, and it was doing good until it wasn't. It crashed. It was also a government dependent program, which you and I both learned in the solar space that those are volatile. They're good when they're good, and they're bad when they're bad, right? So I closed my student loan forgiveness center down. They cut my check. I went from crypto crashed. I went from a nice 7-figure net worth, great multiple 6-figure passive income, passive and total income, to basically nothing. They cut my check. I say, wait a minute. I built it. I have my qualifications. I should get paid. Basically, the owner of the company says, hey, man, take me to court. And he's got a lot more money than I do. That's when I got started in the solar industry. But before the solar industry, I started selling security door to door. And I remember Time Warner, for those of you guys that know Time Warner Cable, Time Warner had an alarm system. And Time Warner security systems went out of business. So all these people that had an alarm system with Time Warner, they didn't have an alarm system anymore. So I would see their signs here and there. And I was like, man, if I could get a list of people with this Time Warner stuff, I could go and visit them. They're used to having an alarm. They don't have one anymore. That'd be a good list to have. So I started looking on LinkedIn. I started looking on Facebook. I posted on Facebook, does anybody know of any Time Warner employees? Which was a long shot, because even if they do, doesn't mean they have access to this list, right? So I'm thinking, my gears are turning, right? Then I said, what if I post on Craigslist? Because on Google Maps, you could go and basically cruise the world. So I said, and I searched up an address that I knew that had that sign. I said, let's see if I could see the sign through Google Maps. Sure enough, you could. I said, but I don't have time to go and look for this. So I posted an ad like in Mexico, in Colombia, in the Philippines, to hire somebody cheap to do that. I found 2 people, bro. I was paying like $4 an hour in the Philippines or something. This is 2018 or 19. They were finding, and I said, these are the cities I need you to find them in. Bro, they were finding me an abundance of these homes with the address and everything, bro. And they did it through Google Earth. So I'm visiting these homes and I'm slamming deals because all these people are like, oh, yeah, we don't have an alarm system anymore. We need one. Well, I'm with ADT and I'm closing deals. Why? Because that is my identity. My identity is the identity of I'm a winner and I'm the guy that figures shit out. I'm
Resourceful.
not the guy that
You said
stands still and it's like, oh my goodness, poor me, my check got cut. No, F that, dude. I'm the guy that figures shit out. You must be the other guy if you're the one that thinks like that, because that's not me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. One of my mentors always said, if you have enough want to, you always figure out the how to.
I love
Always.
that.
Yeah,
That's a
he
good
said,
one.
not sometime. You always figure out the how to when you have enough what want to. So your want to is not high enough. I know it sounds cold because sometimes people say, "Oh, that's so cold." I'm like, look, we're here to give you the reality. By the way, isn't the ownership empire? Isn't our little tagline say, uncensored, unfiltered, unapologetic? This is
Right.
unfiltered, folks, right? We're going to tell it like it is. We're not here writing books and all that bullshit to sell you some books, tell you what you want to hear. Here you're going to get the cold truth, right? And
Right.
I like it that way. I know you do, right? It's like, tell me the real deal, bro. Don't give me no false praise. Don't give me no pie in the sky. Tell me how hard I got to work. Tell me what hoops I got to jump through. I'll decide if I want to do it, right? but tell me what it is. Don't give me the bullshit. Like really, I want to smack people when they talk about that. Like, you don't have to do much. No, you got to work, right? Like in financial services, you got to get a license, right? But what do we
Yes,
call it? It's a license to print money because
right.
you could make unlimited income. There's no limit, right? I mean, you got a marriage license, right, Jay?
Yes, I do.
You got his driver's license, don't you?
Yep.
I don't know if you got a pet, but if you got a pet, you got to get a pet license. You got all these licenses, and they don't give you a return on investment, right? Think about that.
Right. It's a good point, bro.
Yeah, yeah.
See, and
Without
that's why
license,
that's what this podcast is about, man. So next episode, I know that we're going to be hitting about money. We're going to interview people that make a lot of money, not only from our industry, but from other industries as
correct.
well, because we want to bring some value. And Ed and I, we're going to be shooting the shit. Ed and I are going to be talking about business. We're going to be talking about stories. We're going to be talking about examples. We're going to be talking about our business. Yes, did we do this to get people to work with our company, with us? Not necessarily. Are we going to get people to work with us? Hell yeah, we are. And guess what, though? Because the market, here's one thing I learned from Jim Rohn. The market doesn't pay you based on your seniority or your experience. The market pays you based on the value that you bring to said market. We're going to
Correct.
bring a ton of value to the market. And some of the people are going to say, you know what? I like these guys. You know what? I like it. You know what? I like JC. I want to work with these guys. I need to make some extra money or I need a new career path. And guess what? When that happens, this is one of the tricks about successful people. Successful people are not apologetic about the big money that they earn. You know why? Because they earned it. Keyword earned it, right?
Correct.
I'm not asking for something for nothing. I know that we're going to build an agency of 100,000 licensed agents, and we'll, help bless a lot
Yeah,
of people. And because we get paid a lot
yeah,
of money. But
yeah.
guess what? We earned every single bit of it. And this is one of those things we were talking about. Hey, let's do a podcast. Ed and I are friends. We've got a lot of great content that we have a lot of great contacts, a lot of great content. Why don't we do it? And guess what? We're going to actually get some business because of it. That's a cherry on top. Would you say that that's the case, Ed?
Yeah. And back in my career, right, when I was a narcotics detective, I didn't realize it then, but I realized it later when I got in business. Like, even though it's a, illegal, violent business, dude, they're businessmen and women. Like, it's to them, it's a real business, even though it's illegal, right? It takes a lot of work. Like it really does. For you to make millions of dollars in the drug business, I don't recommend it, by the way, because prison is not too cool. I put a lot of people away for 25 to life, right? Not a good thing. But guess what? It's a business. They run it like a damn business, right? It takes a lot of work. What about sometimes people go, oh, yeah, that rapper, he got lucky. Lucky? You know how long that rapper or the actor, right? Like had to, you only hear, what did you say before? You only hear of people's wins, right? You don't hear about the losses.
Yep.
That's how it is. You don't hear about all the losses that people have. It's always when they show up and now they're famous, right? Or now they got money. People just think it just happened overnight, right? What is it? Your 20-year overnight success.
Right.
That's how it works, you know?
That's how it works.
Yeah, man, I'm excited because when we decided to launch this, it wasn't about let's do it to recruit people into the company. No, one thing that I know you, right? You're a massive recruiter, okay? We built the number one recruiting team at our company, right? We've always been big recruiters. So that's not a problem that we have. We don't have to do this for recruiting. We really did it because there are people out there, whether in California, New York, okay, everywhere. And by the way, you could do this business overseas, can't you?
That's
Ain't
right.
that great? As long as you get a license, right? You got to sell to the US customers, of course, right? But yeah, you could do this overseas. But anyway, yeah, the point is, folks, we want to do this because there are people out there that have no idea what to do, right? You just think like, you know what? I'm 30, 40, 50, whatever age you are, 60, 70, right? And time is going by, stressing with the wife or the husband, right? We have problems, all these different problems. And I guess I'm just a loser. We're here to tell you, you're not. You got to make some changes. Yeah. Like you said, brother, right? Stop the entertainment, start educating yourself about business, about how your mind works. And I know one thing we're going to do, right? We're going to let people know what are some of the top books that have changed your life? Who are some of the top mentors that have changed your life? And some of them are similar, right? Like Tony Robbins, I went through the firewalk a few times. Okay. If I meet anybody in person, you'll see my tattoo. It says, nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning you choose to give it. You know why I put that tattoo on my forearm? Because that meaning change my view of the world, of my life, right? Not, let me say it again for you guys. Nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning you choose to give it. Not your neighbor, not your parents, not your boss, no one else. It's you. You give things meaning, right? So if your life sucks right now, write down 10 reasons why your life sucks. I promise you, 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, get resolved with more money, right?
That's
Would you
right.
say? Right. Yeah. When your bank account is overflowing, the stress level goes down. It's just amazing, right? You have options in your life, right? You know what? Let's take the family to Hawaii. Let's go, right? This is the same thing. Took the family, right, uh, to Vegas, right? My wife, she's from Dominican Republic. She saw like on movies and stuff. Wow, Las Vegas. I go, oh, let's go. And we've been traveling and going on vacations. You know why? Because money's not an issue. We don't have to look at the menu, right, from the right to the left. We can now look at the
Right.
menu, right, from the left to the right. So
I love it,
I'm
man.
excited,
Listen,
brother.
that was a great way, Ed, to close out our first episode. I think you dropped the
Yeah.
mic right there, bro. So, listen, I just want to encourage people. We're going to be on here every week. Ed and I are going to be here shooting this shit with each other. We're going to be talking about business. We're going to be talking about sales. We're going to be talking about money. We're going to be interviewing people about all these subjects and then some, right?
Right.
We are passionate about this. And there's a lot of value. And there's a lot of good podcasts out there, right? The niche that we are in is, just entrepreneurship in general, with a really specific niche of network marketing and the financial services industry, because that's the industry that we're in. But we're going to have real estate professionals here. We're going to have professional athletes on here, and we're going to bring a lot of value. So, any closing thoughts, Ed, before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just that you know, don't take it lightly. Okay. You were born to be successful, but you've been programmed for failure, right? Start listening to the right podcasts, okay? Not just ours. There's a lot of great content out there, right? Start focusing on, you know what? Let me start putting nutrition into my mind, the right nutrition into my brain, okay? Not stuff that doesn't make me any money. So if you have a habit of the first thing you do when you grab your cell phone, right, is you spend 2 or 3 hours on social media, nothing wrong with that, but that shouldn't be your priority. Your priority should be is, damn, I wrote down my 10 problems or why my life is not where I want it to be. Boy, Ed was right. JC was right. 9 out of 10, I'm telling you, it's going to be 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. It gets fixed with money. Even some people, right? They go, Jay, oh, you don't understand my situation. My wife is a pain in the ass. You don't understand. Really? How about when you have unlimited cash flow coming in, right? Residual income, and you can say to her, honey, you know what? Where do you want to go? How about we go shopping Saturday? Let's spend a couple $1,000s shopping. Why don't we go here? Why don't we go there? Right? So it's what money can do in your life. It's the options that you have, right? It's the magical moments that you have. And what if there's an emergency, right? We'll talk about that next week, man. But most people don't even have a couple thousand if an emergency happened. I'm talking about like, all right,
Yeah.
something where some type of medical care or something, right? And it shouldn't be that way. So we're not going to be apologetic talking about money because you know what? It's not the most important thing in the world, but it's right up there with oxygen. Right, my brother?
Right. That's
I'm
right.
excited to do this with you, brother.
Me too, my friend. Hey, let's make it happen. And the only thing I want to, and I was really not going to say anything, and I was going to say something. I said no, I'm going to leave it, but no, I have to say this. Yes, we are going to talk about money a lot, but I want also to make another distinction. Are we saying that money solves every problem? No, solves most. I do agree with that. I subscribe to the fact that it solves most. But yes, of course, there's some problems that it just doesn't solve, right? To me, my relationship with the creator is most important. My relationship with my family is most important. But I do know that when my kids are able to go to that private school, that costs money. And that's important to us, right? And I don't think that money is up. I don't subscribe to money's a root of all evil. You kind of touched on it earlier. No, it's the
Right,
love of money that's the root of all evil.
right, right.
Money is neutral. So that's why we're going to be talking about money a lot. We're going to be talking about business and success and all those things. So, but anyways, I just wanted to, make that distinction. But Ed, you were great, brother. I appreciate it. I think this was pretty awesome for being the first one, the first of many. We're going to bring a lot of value, my brother. Appreciate you, Ed.
Yeah, this ain't scripted, folks. We're just, like you said, shooting the shit. Hope you
That's right.
guys enjoyed it, man. Take care, my
Take
brother.
care, guys. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.